It took 3 betrayals for this young puppet to completely give up on the world around him. Betrayed by his mother, his chosen family, and a young boy, Wanderer started out without a name, without a purpose, and without a heart. Forced to travel aimlessly until finding his purpose. Unfortunately, it was one filled with rage. A rage he would use to mark history with, and a history he hoped to erase. The story of Wanderer is a nuanced one that's already very complex without having to bring gender into it, which is exactly what we're doing today. We're gonna bring gender into the discussion. Many people online claim that Wanderer is transcoded, or if you don't know, this means that through subliminal text and subtle lore choices, that Wanderer was purposely written to be either a trans person or a trans allegory. And this video today is to explore just that. So what makes people think that he is trans? How does gender play a role in his story, and our story? All these questions and more will be explored, so let's talk about the transcoding of Wanderer. Hey, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel. My name is E, as in like existential dread. And in today's video on my series of queer coding in Genshin Impact, we are of course going to be tackling that of the transcoding of Wanderer, like I just said like 2 seconds ago. We are talking about Wanderer, Scaramouche, Kabukimono, the puppet, or in my case, Turbo Verge. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. And the transcoding that is present in his writing. So I'm really excited for this video, so let's just get right into it. But hey, wait, real quick. You should like and subscribe so I can continue to do this because it's a lot of fun. And also you should join us in the queerest community in Twitch, arguably, at twitch.tv/eissocial for a good time. So anyway, let's go. So first, I want to talk about Wanderer himself and his backstory, since I see it often misconstrued and misinterpreted online like all the time. As we know, the Raiden Shogun, or Ei, tragically lost her sister Makoto in the Cataclysm. As I've previously bagged on her before about, Ei does not have the most stellar coping skills when it comes to loss and trauma. So with the ancient knowledge that only she knew, she decided to construct a prototype puppet that could hold her gnosis and watch over Inazuma while she hid her consciousness into the plane of euthymia. Her prototype turned out to be who we know as Wanderer today, but he was born without a name, for Ei never gave him one. Yae states that Ei's plan was always to end up discarding this puppet, but that she thought it was too cruel, so she merely sealed his powers and left him. We find out through the lore in the Husk of Opulent Dreams artifact set that Ei left the puppet at Chikai Pavilion while he slept and dreamed. She did this, seeing that he was far too kind of a soul, for he wept while he slumbered, while he was still in her possession. He was never supposed to wake up at the pavilion, but when he did, the realization was crushing, and thus this action defined the puppet's first betrayal, the betrayal from his creator. But one day, a kind samurai by the name of Katsuragi found him and took him back to Tatarasuna, where he grew close to the humans there and to Niwa, Kazuha's ancestor. He was dressed in a way that was not conventional to the humans around him at that time, wearing the golden feather token that Ei gave him as a way to signal his divine identity. Because he was dressed so strangely, he was given the name Kabukimono, which means an eccentric person. The puppet enjoyed this name and found it to be proof that he could be human and belonged to the people of Tatarasuna. And thus, the puppet was finally bestowed with a name. And with a name came purpose. This piece unfortunately did not last long. Tatarasuna was soon meddled with when a researcher from Fontaine named Escher arrived. Escher, or Eschier, you know what, had ways to process crystal marrow more efficiently, but this meddling with the Great Furnace in Tatarasuna had fatal consequences, and the black gas that seeped from it started to affect the craftspeople. Niwa tried to put a stop to this and get help, which didn't work, so Kabukimono sought to get the Raiden Shogun's help. Unfortunately, Ei had officially entered the plane of euthymia, and Yae spoke in her stead. Yae said she would send reinforcements, though it wasn't very convincing, but once they arrived, everything seemed fine. Escher said Kabukimono stopped the furnace and that Niwa fled, something Kabukimono believed as well, though later we find out through the Sumeru Archon quest that Niwa was killed by Escher, who was actually Dottore, the Mad Doctor, all along. Escher gave Wanderer a human heart that he claimed Niwa took from another. Wanderer was so appalled by this act of violence, he threw the heart away, not knowing it was actually Niwa's heart all along. So thus, The second betrayal that stained Kabukimono's memory was a misunderstanding in the end. The puppet shed this name as he continued to wander Inazuma, where he ran into a little boy living all by himself. His parents were missing, and given that they worked at Tatarasuna, most likely perished from the incidents there. The puppet found a sense of identity with this boy, and they agreed to live together. But sadly, the boy was not an immortal being like the puppet, and was sick. The puppet in him promised to live for the other, but this promise was far from the boy's reach to make. The puppet came home one day to find the boy lifeless on the floor, which marked the third and final betrayal for the young, naive, sensitive boy. He burned the house down in a fury and hoped the house would consume him too. He traveled on like this, without a purpose and without a heart, for years to come. See, the poor puppet had only known loss and betrayal, and felt as though he didn't even know himself. He resented himself for the way he was made, a puppet when he should have been a human, a soulless husk when he should have had a heart. All he wished for as he wandered through the land was to achieve this sense of purpose. He wanted to finally have a heart to call his own, something that would convince him of his humanity, which he believed was never in his cards since the day he was created. This self-loathing festered into hate, anger, and resentment, and when he fell into the hands of the fatui, well, he made for the perfect weapon. After enduring countless experiments at the hand of the doctor, who had never revealed to the puppet that he was the one behind his second betrayal this whole time, the puppet grew more and more powerful. His powers were fully unleashed, and was soon granted the title of the Sixth Harbinger by the Tsaritsa herself, also known as the Balladeer or Scaramouche, a name filled with violence, and a name that felt perfect for him. He finally had an identity again, and he used it to enact all of the maliciousness that he thought the world deserved. At some point, he was the cause of the 5 great blacksmith sword art bloodlines in Inazuma to be wiped out, where he told one of the surviving members that shared a lineage with Niwa to tell the Raiden Shogun of his existence, and that he would now be known as Kunikuzushi, which means the destroyer of nations. And so he continued with these new titles, and during the present-day Archon quests, finally got his hands on the Electro-Gnosis. By working with the Doctor and the Grand Sages in Sumeru, they sought to make him a god. Scaramouche saw the Gnosis as his right, his fate, and his heart. Of course, this plan ended up being foiled by the Traveler and the Dendro Archon. Scaramouche fell from atop his ideals and plummeted into despair. He had caused so much pain, so much suffering. All for what? A heart? The god of wisdom, showcasing empathy, took him under her wing, though he used this against her, and in an act of self-destruction, tricked both her and the Traveler into letting him access Irminsul, the great database of Teyvat, so that he would go back in time and make sure he was never born and erased from history. This outcome did not go as he expected. He had hoped that by never existing, then the people of Tatarasuna would be saved, the blacksmiths he killed would never perish, and that people would be brought back to life. Unfortunately, this did not happen, for a copy of him still existed but lived as a true husk. This is Wanderer, who we meet, that has no memories and truly no real identity. We tell him of his true past, the one he tried to get rid of, and he decides he wants his memories back. In doing so, he regains his true self again, and since his will to accept his past sins and his identity was so bright, the god smiled down on him and granted him a vision he keeps close to his chest, right where his heart should be. He finally has a heart to call his own. The Traveler is granted the opportunity to once and for all give him a name, one he can finally own and never be rid of. If he isn't called by this, he is known as Wanderer, for that has been his identity all along. Okay, one crazy recap. I promise to you that understanding his story is imperative to our discussion today. Out of all the food that I'm cooking for you today, I hope that you paid close attention to the last course, that meal. Okay. I hope you paid attention to everything that was just said, because it's important. It's important. It's important. It's important. So, as you might have noticed, Wanderer's whole story revolves around that of identity. What makes a human? What does Wanderer lack that disqualifies him from being a human? Who is he? What is his true name? All of these questions plague Wanderer throughout his whole life, and only until recently did he get the answer to some of these. Now, these very questions that I just asked tie into the very reason why people seek see him as being transcoded. So I've seen this discussion talked about here and there online, and as usual is quite the topic of debate. People get very heated when you bring this topic up and get like really angry when you even bring up the possibility of him being trans, as confirmed by a few comments here and there when I posted about wanting to do this type of video in my community post. So hey guys. And others get really upset if you dismiss this idea and take it very personally. I think the discussion surrounding Wanderer and his possibility for being trans is actually a great tool to talk about the larger issues in the intersection between fandom and the LGBTQ community. So let's start to answer the question of whether or not Wanderer is actually trans. Okay, so first, let's talk about what coding means. After this video, I highly recommend watching my first 2 videos on queer coding in Genshin Impact. They go into a lot more examples into what coding means, and there's a lot more discussion going on over there, so definitely go check those out after this one. Not right now. You're good, take your time. But TLDR, for those who do not remember or those who are new, coding is when writers and storytellers use subtle signifiers to convey to an audience that a character is queer. Hey! This could be through how they are described, how they interact with other characters, and also metaphors and their storylines that can heavily reflect queer stories. For examples in popular media that you may or may not know, please go look at the other videos. So let's look at Wanderer. When people talk about him and debate whether or not it is valid to say he is transcoded, people often always look to how he was born, or in this case, created. It is often misunderstood that Ei originally made him to be in the image of either her or her sister Makoto. And because of this assumption, we gather from that he was originally made female to better represent one of the 2 sisters. But that just isn't the case. Yae stated that he was just made to be a prototype, nothing more. You could take this as he was initially made to be genderless or just, a puppet, but with the continued use of pronouns such as him and he, we can assume that at some point the male gender was placed upon him. Okay, hey, hold on. I know that some of you hearing this may be feeling really disheartened right now, since the very basis to the transcoded argument was that he was created to be a girl first, and throughout his journey found out that he was a boy. So when I sit here and I tell you, hey guys, I did some digging, bad news. This was never the case. It sounds like I'm just taking the theory and on it. But I assure you, I'm not. His original gender was never the issue, and I find it to be of no relevance, to be honest. His real transcoding is very evident in his story itself. So much so that it resonates very deeply with trans people. So let's better understand what we are talking about. Trans people often embark on a very similar journey. This trans journey is what we're going to be talking about right now and how it relates very closely to that of Wanderers. Now, before any neckbeards get mad and start typing furiously in the comments, I want to make one thing crystal clear. Trans people have always existed throughout history. I hate the very close-minded argument that trans people or genderqueer people are just some new thing and we're forcing it down your throats. This video is not trans propaganda, whatever that means. And before you say something ludicrously ignorant, I want to state right now that this video is celebrating and validating the trans identity. So please just listen up, okay? So a bit of trans history, because God willing, I'm gonna trick you into learning something today, okay? As long as there have been people, there have been trans people. When it comes to gender and gender expression, it has been historically toyed with, and the male and female binary has never been so clear-cut as we initially perceive it to be. Since some of the earliest accounts, evidence of people who do not fit within the typical gender binary have been recorded. In ancient Sumerian times, holy figures in temples and palaces were perceived as being neither male or female, but a secret third thing, as described by James Neal in his work, The Origins and Role of Same-Sex Relations in Human Societies. In Native American cultures, two-spirit people were those who were considered neither male or female and were often seen as another gender entirely. These types of people and how they identified and how they were perceived, of course, changed between tribes, but often they would pick up traits or responsibilities of the opposite gender and often filled religious roles roles as healers or leaders in ceremonies, as described from the Indian Health Service website or ihs.gov. Typically, two-spirit people were considered lucky in romantic relationships, which were believed by the Lakota, Cheyenne, Mojave, Crow, and others. In Scythian times, gender was often very different from how we perceive it today. Herodotus, the Greek philosopher, mentioned often the group called Inares, who were Scythian diviners who were born male but acted, talked, and dressed like women. He theorized that they were afflicted by Aphrodite herself with this female disease, and scholars have struggled since to use modern binary wording to correctly identify these priests, which was discussed by Rachel Hart in her work Dismantling Western Binary Systems. Roman writers such as Marcus Manilius and Philo of Alexandria depicted trans people in ancient Rome as using every method possible to change their appearance from being born male to embracing being a woman. Even the Roman emperor Elagabalus is considered to be a trans woman by historians. She ruled from 218 to 222 CE, why is that so weird to say, and was born a male, but insisted that she would be referred to using she, wore clothes reserved for women, and often outwardly wished to get surgery to get rid of her, male little guy. If you know what I mean. The word transgender didn't come into the English lexicon until the 1960s. In 1952, trans icon Christine Jorgensen was the first American to undergo gender confirmation surgery and was ushered into the limelight and as a public figure as she captured the nation's attention. Trans people have always been very influential figures in LGBTQ+ movements and protests, where they fought alongside other members of the community in 1959 against police who were targeting them at the Cooper Donuts Cafe in LA, and of course participating in the Stonewall riots in 1969. Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera were two of the most outspoken and influential trans figures in the fight for LGBTQ+ rights in America. But since they were trans, found themselves to be often ostracized within their own communities. The two started the Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries Organization, or STAR, to house young transgender people who were homeless due to being kicked out by their families, which was unfortunately a very common occurrence. Marsha continued to grow as one of the most influential LGBTQ+ advocates and was featured in Andy Warhol's series of prints in 1975 called Ladies and Gentlemen, and continued to fight very openly for LGBTQ rights through the US. This video, admittedly, is by no means a full, extensive retelling of trans history. This, of course, isn't every single trans movement or trans win or trans loss throughout history. It was essential to talk about these points in order to understand Scaramouche better. It is only through learning trans history and the trans story where we can fully understand Wanderer and also ourselves. So now let's talk about the connections. So first, as I briefly mentioned earlier, people often look at what gender Wanderer was born initially and whether or not he wore women's veils or women's clothes to determine whether or not he is trans. And I honestly see these pieces of evidence as missing the point when it comes to his trans story and symbolism. It just isn't really important what clothes he may or may not have worn or some other type of outward qualities that he can possess that sort of check these vague boxes to confirm that he is a trans person. I don't really like that. It somehow insinuates that there is some strict form or prerequisite for who is a proper trans person or who is valid or not in their trans identity. I think that is a trap and not what this video is about. It's about his story. The very basis of how he was written, Wanderer was made a puppet, but desired with every single ounce of his being to be a human. He was assigned this way of living at birth or at creation, which he didn't resonate with. This act of rejecting the role or identity that was put upon you when you had no say, and growing up knowing in your soul that you identify as something else, is an inherent part of being transgender. This goal of his to find a heart and find a name for himself is also very trans. Finding a heart or modifying your body to better align with your identity is a common occurrence with trans individuals. Now, I'm not saying that every single trans person goes through or needs to go through surgical procedures to be considered trans, but I am saying that it is a common occurrence. It's this feeling of disconnect from your body and thinking that what you have or don't have, anatomically speaking, directly contradicts with your gender expression. This can lead to body dysmorphia or gender dysphoria and can be a very distressing experience to those who experience it. We see Wanderer go through this sense of dysmorphia or dysphoria often by how much it bothers him that he is lacking the single qualifier that he is deemed to be the marker of being a human. That desire and act in itself resonates very strongly with people who identify as trans, as we saw with Christine Jorgensen and LGBTQ. The act of him searching for a name is also a huge one, for people during their transition often name themselves to better align with their gender identity. Like in Marsha P. Johnson's story, when she was choosing her name, she decided to take on Marsha and said that the P in her name stood for pay it no mind, which she used often as her motto. The act of finding her name and the meaning behind it stayed with her throughout her life as a trans woman and an activist. So when Wanderer was finding his place in his identity, and when he was first named Kabukimono by the kind people of Tatarasuna, he was emboldened by that name. Though it was a bit odd, he saw it as a symbol of him being recognized by these people and as proof of him being human. And as quoted by his character story 1, yes, they made him different, but such was proof of his humanity. Proof that he belonged in Tatarasuna. When he felt betrayed by Tatarasuna and continued to wander, he again looked for a new title. The Tsaritsa would then grant him the title of the Balladeer, a moniker that he felt aligned more with his identity of violence and power. And of course, the first time he ever asked to be given a name, it was an honor given to the traveler, or to us, which gave Wanderer a bigger sense of control and filled the hole of never initially being given a name. So please ignore the fact that I squashed this beautiful moment for him by naming him Turbo Verge. Okay? Again, don't worry about it. Hey, I love him, okay? I mean it like in an endearing way. Okay, anyway, moving on. It was only until he learned the truth of what happened at Tatarasuna, and with the loving support of Nahida, did Wanderer start to find his true path. Okay, so for this next part of the video, I will be talking about some very heavy, serious, potentially triggering topics that do deal with and violence on trans individuals. So please skip to this timestamp right here if you would rather not listen. I totally understand, dude. I was also very emotional writing this portion of the script, so please just take care of yourselves. Another unfortunate piece of Wanderer's story that is relatable to trans people is the thought of self. I did not mention this piece of info earlier, but some of the historical accounts were not all cases of celebrating trans people. The Empress Elagabalus' life was unfortunately taken away at 18 due to her eccentricities. Christine Jorgensen, though a special case of becoming a popular public figure, could not hold down a real job due to being a trans woman and relied on being a public figure and nightclub persona for her income. Marsha's story is especially tragic and infuriating, for such a powerful and influential figure for our very rights here in America struggled with her mental health throughout the 70s and was unfortunately found in the Hudson River in 1992. Her life was filled with ups and downs, and though she had found a community, her youth was filled with a fraught family life and often being homeless. Though she did have issues with her mental health, her friends have adamantly denied that this was a which the police had carelessly ruled. And in 1992, when she passed, anti-LGBTQ violence was some of the worst it had ever been, so the community did not believe for a second that she had taken her own life. Her funeral crowded the streets outside the church in which it was held. In 2022, Ashley Austin, Shelley L. Craig, Sandra D'Souza, and Lauren B. McEnroy held a study on harm violence amongst transgender youth and found that 82% have considered taking their own life and 40% have attempted. The study sought to find out why, and it is mainly through external factors, such as how transgender youth are treated in their very homes, how society treats them, some internalized self-hate, and other factors that play the biggest roles. Though trans people have been around since the beginning, they are still not accepted, and find themselves to be at the receiving end of hate and discrimination from all sides, no matter where they go. Wanderer's story tackles these topics as well. We see in his backstory, when he burns the house the child passed away in, that he sits in the flames and hope they consume him. He also states how he wished he had never been born at all. And of course, the attempt to erase his existence completely when going back in Irminsul was very on the nose. Wanderer, in this regard, is an unfortunate case of relatability with trans individuals. He feels abandoned by his creator, his mother, when she left him alone. Though this was quite the misunderstanding, he felt as though she saw him as faulty and broken and abandoned him. Being abandoned for being what parents see as faulty is an all too common occurrence with trans children. His self-hatred for not having a heart, for constantly not having a name, and wishing he was just never around is a thought that a lot of trans people struggle with as well. It's relatable, and that's infuriating. I brought up this side of trans history and how it relates to Wanderer's story because I think it's important to not just sweep it under the rug. I want this video to be a celebration of trans people and potential trans representation, but it is of course very important to understand the impact that society has on the trans and non-binary members of our community. We need to fight for them and be vocal for and with them. So since I live in America, I can talk pretty extensively on what is happening in my own country. And right now, the attack on trans people is absolutely overwhelming. With this detransition documentary running around that's being sponsored on my own videos, dude, I don't even know how to turn that off and it pisses me off. With states like Florida and Texas taking away rights to gender-affirming care, and with rampant anti-trans mindset that has swept the nation, discussions like this one is very important. And it's more important now than ever. And yeah, a video essay talking about an anime Genshin character isn't gonna change anything, but I hope that it has at least tricked a few of you into giving a shit. Through these videos, I want to use the love that we have for these amazingly complex Genshin Impact characters as a vessel in which to touch on problems that actually affect our day-to-day lives. Wanderer is a beautiful character. He is one of the richest cases of storytelling that is present in this game. He has hurt people and he has hurt himself, and now he's on the journey of acceptance. He has made so many mistakes, he has loved so deeply, and he has been betrayed and manipulated and cared for. Though he may see himself as a puppet without a heart, he is one of the most human characters in this game. As I really went into in my second queer coding video, representation is very important to all aspects of the LGBTQ plus community. It is for sure just a game, but also seeing yourself in a character such as this one could save a life. Stories are so powerful, and Wanderers is one of the most moving stories I've ever come across in media. Wanderer, like so many trans kids who have been kicked out from their home, wanders. He finds communities that love him, and he finds a name and eventually a heart. This whole time he thought he was purposeless, but upon becoming the Wanderer before getting his memories back, that's when he truly realized that he's had a soul and has been human this whole time. He can be a symbol of hope for so many. It is such a precious story of the trans experience like I have never seen before. Now, do I think that a Hoyoverse purposefully coded transmoosh? Now, do I think that Hoyoverse made his story to be so transcoded on purpose? Honestly, no. I don't think they were aware of what they were cooking, to be honest. I do believe that they code LGBTQ plus people in their games all the time, as pointed out by my other videos, but in this case, I don't think it was purposeful, but regardless, they ate, you know? The parallels in the poetry are just so evident, and I hope that hearing his story and learning some history helped or informed some of you that are listening. I was very emotional while doing research for the script and while writing it. I cried a few times. And almost cried while filming, I'll be honest. I haven't publicly stated here on my YouTube platform that I myself am struggling with my own gender identity all the time. Okay, I'll be honest, it's whooping my ass. So Hey, for everyone watching, hello. I've settled on being a demigirl, and if you don't know what that means, I've chosen they, she pronouns for myself. I want to be pretty frank about my experience right now with you because, I don't know, some of you might relate to this, I guess, but when I first asked my friends to start using they more with me, and when my friend used they for the first time, oh boy, did that hit like crazy, dude. Like, my heart just soared like it had never before. And I didn't even realize, I didn't even know that this was a source of disconnect for me. And I started dressing and cutting my hair and doing other things outwardly to better make me feel more like how I want to. And honestly, I've never felt more myself in my whole life, and I had no idea that I wasn't feeling like myself this whole time. I had no idea. It's like the thing that you didn't know that you didn't know. And when I started, you know, exploring this part of myself more, dude, I feel great. I feel really great, though I'm still figuring things out, and it is very much a process, and there's no rush. So, you know, I got time. And again, to be like really transparent, I felt really silly when I decided this and told people. When my friends tell me how they identify, bro, I hoot and I holler, dude. I'm like, hell yeah, congrats on the pronouns, dude. Like, it makes me so happy when my friends tell me how they identify. But the minute that I decided it for myself, oh boy, I felt like stupid. I felt like I was ridiculous. And that moment of pure joy when my friends accepted me was diminished by this sense of like self-loathing and overthinking, and that sucks. But when I was researching this script and learning about the history and how people have been toying with gender and realizing that the gender binary has never been for them, I have never felt more validated before in my life. Clothes or makeup does not maketh or unmaketh man, you know? It's the love that's within yourself and the name that you choose to fit how you feel makes up who you are. I want us to celebrate each other and others in this community that are badass enough to look up to these societal pressures and be like, hey, you know what? I'm good. That's not for me, dude. And I hope everyone who is watching, no matter how you identify, I hope you know that you are loved, and it is so much better that you're here with us. And I don't want you to let anyone tell you that you don't have a heart. And everyone, please remember that not all those who wander are lost. Hey, thanks for watching. I humbly ask for your like and your subscribe so I can continue to make videos on topics such as this because, oh God, I love them so much. And I love you guys. So thank you for being here and thank you for watching. And also, if you want to join the queerest community on Twitch, then you better join us over on twitch.tv/eissocial. Also, I have included some resources down below in the description to help you find some pro-trans and LGBTQIA+ organizations near you. Some are sorted by which state you live in the US. And if you live outside of the US, there are some links to help you find some organizations near you as well. And you know what, dude? Yeah, the Trevor Project is also linked down there, okay? Yes, I know they are literally linked and mentioned and used every single time when talking about LGBTQIA+ issues, but they are a huge resource and they do have some hotlines for those who may need some help, which is never a bad thing. Also, join our Discord, which is also linked down there. We talk about some nerdy things, primarily Genshin. Oh my God, I forgot the name for Genshin. Please comment something lovely in the comments down below. There are, of course, going to be some disdainful comments by those that will just never get it. So try not to engage with them. That's just what they want. And instead, engage with each other and just celebrate each other. So yeah, do that instead. Go watch my other videos on queer coding and Genshin Impact and let me know what else I should talk about in the future. And also, if you want to become a member of the channel just to support me, you can do so by clicking the join button down below. Okay, that is all for me. Please be kind to yourself today. And if I don't see you on Twitch, then I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Bye. My queer coding is I got Freddy Fazbear on my arm. Horror. Oh, and Ryusuke's ass.